Welcome to another episode of Data River Deep Dive. We are joined today by Dr. Tim Wiegels, a seasoned data leader known for bridging the gap between infrastructure, marketing, analytics, and business value. What follows is a fun, high-energy conversation packed with practical insights, a few hard truths about KPIs, and an honest reflection on Tim's journey through the data world. We talk about dashboards, decision-making, data culture, CDOs, and yes, there's even some singing, but more on that in the episode. Enjoy it. Yeah, welcome everyone to the next episode of Data River Deep Dive. Today we have the pleasure to have Tim with us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure to have you with us because honestly, you were one of the persons that I was actually admiring for the podcast that you are doing. And I mean, you have several formats where you also appear as a podcast host, and and I always was like, that dude has a very nice, authentic way to speak, to engage, and it's always like it seems like you just going with the flow, and it looks really nice. Yeah, so that was my short introduction to you nice. Already.
I'm turning a bit red, but I like doing this, so I think this is why it works.
Very good. We will go deeper into your background. Yeah. But we start every episode with a fun fact about a river. Why? Because our company name, DRIVA, stands for Data and River. So, and you are actually born in Stralsund.
Yeah, sadly. I grew up in Berlin, but there was my mother's parents lived up in the north, so yeah.
Yeah. So,
dumb luck.
Yeah, but you're a Nordic child. So in Germany we say Nordisch. Yeah. By nature. And but you live for quite some time now in Hamburg. Yeah. So I have a fun fact about Hamburg. Oh. Let's see if you know about that. Yeah. So there was a fisherman. A scientist, a German scientist in 1913, that had a bottle, and in that bottle there was a message, like these old bottled messages and so on. He threw that into the Elbe River, and a fisherman found that bottle 2012, so with the message, and the message within it was he wanted to know how long it will take the bottle, to be then found.
100 years, great.
100 years. Did you know about? Did you know this story?
Maybe, but I think it's more interesting. Where was it found?
Oh, that's interesting. To be honest, I have to look that up. I mean, he was a fisherman, so I would assume somewhere, anywhere.
Right? Yeah. I mean, after 100 years,
it could be anywhere.
Back in Hamburg,
yeah. But I was thinking like, okay, what was the intention of that person? Because he said like, okay, I want to see how long does it take. So it's an interesting thing. I think I'm questioning myself, like, was he thinking about this outcome? Because he's obviously dead and he was not able to.
I mean, it wasn't a very scientific measure, right? But you probably would just want to see what happened. But I don't think they had in mind that it takes 100 years.
I doubt that as well. I don't think that he had that in mind. But you know why I'm sharing this fun fact with you? It says a lot about data-driven decision and KPIs. So that is a KPI, I think.
What was his hypothesis? What was the use case?
Exactly. And we will talk today a lot about KPIs. So I thought, hey, why not sharing this fun fact with you? It's a good start, right? Okay, good. All right, then. Let's engage a little bit about yourself. I mean, you are heavily experienced, I must say. I mean, you are highly engaged in data strategy and building up data operating models, cultures, then working very much in, I would say, reporting and analytics sections. And you were working for interesting companies, I would say. A lot of innovative and startup mentality companies like Free Now, My Taxi, Good Games, but then also some more, I would say, tradition companies.
It's a fun story, like Sing, for example.
Exactly, Sing, EDC, also quite big here in Germany. So there's a wide variety even of industry sectors that you have engaged with, and you are now an independent consultant. Yeah. So you did already some of these stations as a consultant.
ECE, for example, is consultant, and
Exactly. But at Freenow, you were an internal, and you built quite a strong team. Yeah. I think it was something of 15 employees.
Yeah, then I think the pinnacle was 120.
Exactly.
But I mean, same, it was like a very wavy structure of or organizational structure as well.
Yeah, but you started with a team around 50, and then you ended up having a unit of 100 men around. Yeah, that's quite a big improvement, or big.
Still wasn't enough, but.
Yeah, but it tells a lot. I mean, I will have some questions about that, but it tells a lot about the importance of data.
Yeah.
But your background, academic-wise, is something completely different.
That always sounds like this. So my background is bioinformatics, right? Which sounds, I'm not sure how it sounds. Sounds weird. It sounds very scientific, but to be honest, that was like 25 years ago almost. And I wanted to do something which was already at the, how do you say this, at the intersection of something where you need strong subject matter expertise and something with, tech. I mean, back then you said computers, but to be honest, bioinformatics is 100% data science. It's nothing else, right? I think the whole data science buzzword didn't exist in 2025, so either the buzzword is new or we are old. That's something that you guys can decide. But I wanted to do something in that direction, and that was, I very quickly realized the biological part, that's interesting. I'm more interested in how I can understand the issues and then really solve them with computational power.
So it would, I mean, back in days, we would have said probably evidence-based. Now we say database, but I mean, it's just a wording topic, but I get what you're saying. Like, it is strongly related to
And if you look at other people that are at our age bracket in data position, I mean, most of them are like, what's the English word? The German word is Quereinsteiger, so they come from another expertise or from another background because it just there was nothing around, right? And this whole bioinformatics thing, obviously a lot of people that studied, Wirtschaftsinformatik, so economy and computer science also. Because I think we were the first ones that really had to deal with data a lot and databases and look at different data points and things like that. So I think it sounds weird, but to be honest, it's quite natural to move into this direction if you don't stay in academia, which I didn't want to.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I mean, the very analytical, knowledge-based, also dealing with evidence and semantics and so on. That is something that is already quite heavily within the with the program. Yeah. But what was the motivation to go even for a PhD?
I would now like to say I was always very interested in academia. That was always my dream. Now the intention was really, I was finishing my diploma thesis, also the last person in the University of Hamburg to do diploma thesis. That was the last year. And then I was like, well, what do I do now? I mean, I could go to pharma. Because the whole data thing wasn't big then. I think I always realized I want to do more in this direction. But to be honest, the PhD was in a very interesting institute. It was something without teaching and without stupid things like being in the university and so on. And it was in Hamburg, it was in English, so I could pretty much stay at home, work internationally. And to be totally honest, the project was interesting and the pay grade was quite high. So it was pretty much as if you would get a full position at a university, but it was tax-free. So it was a good mixture out of, I don't want to work 9 to 5. I still don't want to work 9 to 5. I will never do this. But it was quite good to go from my lazy university life, where I worked a lot next to it, but I never wanted to do this full time, to
So it ticked a lot of boxes for you.
And it ticked a lot of boxes,
And it was a nice transition into
And it was also nice to get a PhD. But to be honest, I mean, the first intention was, let's do that. Let's do this for 4 years. I get a PhD. This is nice. But I pretty quickly realized, also very weird group, very weird structure. I mean, there was a laboratory. We built a software to to get protein structures, right? I mean, in the synchrotron, you take proteins, you crystallize them, and you shoot radiation on it. And then you get some kind of weird fraction pattern, which has many, many dots, which is in 2D, and then you transform this back to 3 dimensions and try to place the right atoms. And this doesn't work if the protein gets bigger and bigger because of, I'm not sure, I forgot about this. But we tried, well, my job was really to fill the gaps. And so I pretty quickly started with pattern recognition, machine learning in there. And also because, I mean, you guys can see this, I like to talk to people. There were always, I think, 4 to 5 workshops every year where we went to the States, to Australia, to Japan, wherever, and showed this tool to the people that really used it. So to institutes in all around the world where people also bought this, was also for pharmaceutical companies. And this PhD pretty quickly changed into, yes, I'm doing software development and I do research a bit, but mainly I do project management for this tool and I sell the tool and try to understand what new features the customers wanted. So in the end, I mean, I started after my first year of PhD with requirements and stakeholder management. I understood these words like 6 years later, obviously, right? I was never sure what I did there, but I already liked that. And I was like, and at some point I had to write my PhD thesis, which I think I did in 6 weeks at night because I had to do other things. And then over with that.
Yeah, but it sounds like it just happened yesterday, the way you're telling about it. Yeah, so
don't say that. I think it's like well, I did my PhD in 2012, so that's it's not yesterday.
It's not yesterday. Oh, okay. But are you? I mean, because what I like always. I mean, and you. It seems like also you can use a lot of anecdotes, or you can create stories, and it gives you also some credibility. You know, like when you talk to people from different.
100%. So I think nowadays, if someone would ask me, should you do a PhD when you want to work in data? Fuck no, don't do that. I mean, it's like, for me it was quite weird because when I went for an industry, which also took me 2 years, we can talk about that later, I was older than 30 and the people around me that were my age were already at head level or director level. I mean, it went quite quickly, but I would say, yes, a PhD is nice and I think I can use a lot of stuff out of the PhD. But I think it's also, a very person-specific thing, and doing that for 4 to 6 years is really not worth it. For full stop, I think that's really it. I mean, nice, but I think you can learn much. I mean, I went from academia directly into Good Game Studios, which was a slight, complete switch of the way of working. And I think I learned more in the first year of Good Game Studios than the 6 years before at my PhD, my postdoc. That 100%.
Okay, but in what way?
Trying things. I mean, the thing is, when you do a PhD, you probably know this picture, right? There's this circle of knowledge, and when you study something, you are like in a radiant on the side, and then when you do a PhD, there's this tiny bubble on the side, and I mean, it wasn't that bad for me, but really the amount of stuff you learn when you're on a startup, and when you also are really into this. And not just focus on your one data science job, then, I mean, I started out as a data scientist. They pretty quickly put me into, you can program quite well. Other people can do that better. Maybe talk to the management because that's what you're really good at. Okay. And then I suddenly worked in marketing. I worked with monetization. I worked with the product people and everything immediately. And I mean, especially if you work in marketing and have to understand this and want to understand this, then there's, loads. So I enjoyed this a lot more than doing academia, to be honest.
I mean, I can see it. I mean, it feeds your natural gifts, your characteristics, being close to people, talking to people, having a certain level of emotional intelligence to understand what they want. And since you are skilled in data science, take it, bring it over to the data scientist guys and tell them, look, dude,
this is what you should do. This is the business. I mean, that usually quite often sadly they don't care about the business problem. They care about what the scientific problem is. But I mean, that's good. I think that's also what my job became. Not being, I wouldn't call myself really a big data person. I'm the interface between the business and the data. And I like to understand. Well, I really want to understand how businesses work. There was also something what I realized quickly. I really hate it when you put me into some kind of team. and then there's like a border on top of me. That was, for example, a problem at Xing, because I was like, hey, there's way more problems to solve than just this tiny shit. Yeah. So let me talk to the other people. No, that has to go this, how do you call this? In German, it's still a post. Yeah. Is there an English word for that? Silent, Chinese whispers? Chinese whispers. And I think that's really something I absolutely hate. That's.
But would you say, would you say that you were also kind of understood as a little troublemaker?
Yeah. 100%.
Because you were not fitting the box, you were going out of it, and you're saying like, hey, before I deal with this, I rather deal with this and that.
And that's actually funny, because I think that's something that works quite well in fast-paced startups, where the focus is really not to do something, but to understand, hey, I have this person, I have these 20 problems, put them on whatever makes sense, doesn't matter. So really enable the people and have them engaged in something. It didn't work at companies like Xing. I mean, it now sounds a bit mean, because I worked in the sales part of Xing, so all a bit more settled, more focused, more structured, not really my thing. Yeah. And I also realized there's way too many. I mean, in the beginning they were quite fine with this, but then at some point I think some people realized when I go on like this, I make them look bad. And I think that's always a thing that in these more traditional companies is not seen
I think because,
happily.
I asked this because I heard that also about myself, and I think like, okay, if you want to call me a troublemaker, call me a troublemaker. At the end of the day, I think is if you have a strong problem-solving mentality, you look for the issues.
Yes. Yeah? And you want to find them, and you want to make clear that this is a problem. Maybe let's not call it troublemaker, let's call it disruptor. I think disruptor is
that's a good.
And maybe that's also, when you say the same about you, maybe that's also the reason why we don't work in traditional companies anymore in one structure, because that's also something I realized, not being in a team. I mean, FreeNow was great. I was very high, close to the management. I was all good. Yeah. But being more responsible for myself. And I mean, the good thing is I can now also go into traditional companies because they buy me and pay me for disrupting stuff. So that's that wouldn't work if I work there, but like this, it's perfect. It's like the best solution for me.
But still, and I mean, we touched that already, you managed to have a team from 15 to 100 in a way under your supervision and controlled, delivering value. How did you manage that?
I think in retrospective, I can say okay-ish. I mean, the thing is, it's I would always say it doesn't really matter whether you have a team of 30 people or of 120. I mean, at some point you pass that, you pass that point where you understand everything and where you are close to everyone. I mean, the worst thing that happened to me was standing in the elevator at some point and always being nice to people. Hey, you're new, where you're working? Oh, I'm working product analytics. I was like, fuck. I should know that because I'm the boss of your boss's boss. But that doesn't matter, right? I mean, this hierarchy level, that's not important. So I really started to have monthly meetings with all the new people because, I mean, moving from 15 to 120 doesn't just mean you hire 100 people, right? I think over the 5 years at FreeNow, I probably had, in my tech state, probably like 250 different people in my teams. And I mean, to be honest, in retrospective, I would say, I think I did an okay job. I think I always try to lead by context, lead by example, which makes you a quite good leader, but a completely shit people manager. I think I'm quite sure.
Would that be what, sorry for interrupting, but would you say that out of the 100 people, some would say this about you?
Yeah, 100%. And they're completely right? Because, I mean, that's not like because I can't do it, but again, there's more interesting things, right? And I think it's, for me, I think that's a very, very normal thing in jobs like tech or data. You rarely have people that are good people managers. People that are good people managers in these jobs don't come from the expertise, right? They come from another side, they come from another field, they take over the team. And I think my team was always like, you are really great in making us understand what we need to do. You are really good in fighting for us. You are shit in giving feedback. I mean, and that's the case, right? I mean, there was this one thing. I mean, I tried to increase the salaries for, I think, 3 years. Finally got $500,000 to spread over the 80 people and get them to a normal salary level. And this is something I focus on, right? And then next to that, there's there's a feedback cycle where I have to give feedback for 50 people, and then I'm like, oh fuck, that's really not my thing, right? Yeah. If something's happening, I like to say this, and I think I also got a lot better in saying this more direct and not being too nice. I think that's also something when you want to be a good leader, you are empathic, you want to work with people. It's quite hard to tell people this is shit. I mean, that's actually good because I learned loads about that at Freenow, what I did right, what I did wrong, and But I think there are quite a few things where I would say in retrospect, I should have taken decisions way earlier. I should have taken decisions way harder. And I mean, there's this nice saying in the Netflix book. You can have a great team, but you will always have beautiful jerks, which are disruptors, but annoying disruptors that want to disrupt things so they look awesome. And I also had these people, and it took me quite some time to understand that they did great work, but keeping them completely destroys the team. And that's, if I now think about it, I think the thing that relaxes me most about being a solopreneur, I think is the right word, is not having a team. That's I love working with people. I do coachings, I do mentorings, I do these kind of things to talk to people, and I like to go to conferences, but not having this, I would say, responsibility for people that their job works is quite freeing.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, I appreciate that you are saying all of this, because that says that you are very strongly reflecting also on your personality, your abilities, skill set, and what you're willing to give. Yeah. And you said it, there are a lot of, and I think there are a lot of leads in the data industry or data profession that are maybe not supposed to be leaders.
And I think they all struggle with that. And I mean, I just had a coaching where someone asked me, hey, I'm now starting to also lead people. How do I get rid of my hands-off mentality and having fun in this? And I'm like, you don't. Full stop. And don't. I mean, that would be the worst thing to do, because that's something you enjoy. Don't become the people manager, because it will make you miserable.
To be something that you actually do not want to be or not naturally are. I mean, there's always this saying like, if people ask you, how did you do that? Like it looks so, like you're so great in your job, and you think about it like, actually, I just did it.
Because it was necessary.
And it was, but the easy stuff seemed to be natural to you. So that's where you should then focus your...
Do this, focus the stuff you like. And I mean, there was always, I'm not sure whether you all read this, but I mean, I went also from the team from 120 to still 120 data people in the company, but building a data mesh, which also included just saying, hey, I have 120 people. I will now take 80 of those and put them into the other teams. And that was so interesting, because you could really see how other lead people understood this, because I quite often got this, how can you get rid of two-thirds of your headcount? You're losing importance. Exactly. And I'm like, no. I gain more importance because I'm still indirectly leading them, and we get more information out of this. But on the paper, what's the fuck on the paper? What does it matter? I still have a VP title, and I know much. I mean, the thing was really, we did this to understand better what the company needs, and that worked. That worked 100%, and...
I actually wanted to ask you exactly this, because I told you I stalked your profile. So and I found that very unusual, especially in a more German culture working environment, where, as you said, people are more looking on how big is your force, what do your
how many stars do you have on your shoulder?
How many stars do you have on your shoulders? And why are you willing to give that up? But that is a way of modern leadership in a federated, necessary working environment.
You really have to understand what is good for the company, what is good for your people, how can they be more... I mean, for them it was sometimes a bit hard, because now you put a data team under someone who's the marketing. CMO was fine, but maybe the operations lead. And there was always more, I had to work with them a little bit about that. But I think that's also important to really understand, what does the company need and how can you be most effective, right? And to be honest, if I would ever go back into a company and work there, I think the position I would like to have is something like expert senior principal next to the management. I mean, you can also call this chief data officer, but I don't think companies need chief data officers. That's another story. But really, I mean, have me as the expert, mentoring the team, but not leading the team. I think that would really be the most beneficial thing. And sure, that would make me lose titles like vice president, but... who gives a shit?
But I think it's very challenging. I mean, you need to have the mindset and the willingness of the people there, and I would like to hear from you how that. I mean, you kind of indicated it that there were some struggle attached to this kind of approach, but would you? I mean, was it at the end for you working? And if it was working or not, what were the key reasons?
It was working. I think if you have a certain size of data team and certain size of company, the centralized stuff doesn't work. I think for me the standard natural evolution is like you come into a company, there's no central data team, there's a few analysts there, there's data scientists working for product, and there's no real structure and no real alignment. Then you have to centralize this to really make those people understand how to work together and still work with the stakeholders, because I think, to be honest, that's the hardest challenge for anyone who leads data teams, to really make your team in some way act also as product managers or as ambassadors of their skills and what they do, because quite often you have introverted people that want to, and that's not easy. But I think the more it grows, the more the company grows, at some point the centralized stuff doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not a fan of complete data mesh, where you have like tiny data teams that have everything in there. I think there's some things like, I think what the data mesh book says, that the data infrastructure should be somewhat central, still allowing people to use other tools, but when there should be a centralized data structure. That the data engineering team, that was also the way we built it. I mean, I built it in a way that the analysts and data scientists and maybe some analytics engineers were part of the data pods in marketing, operations, and so on. And there was still, how do you call that? I think we had data engineering, reporting, and also principles for each craft. So analytics principle, data science principle, that were in the central team to really steer this and help the rest. And I think this structure works great. I think shout out for all the German companies, get principles. I think that's really important, to not just have this leadership track that doesn't make sense. And principles are way more effective and can also really help all your leads. I think the hardest thing was really for the leads, because I think that's quite often my problem. I'm always, I can empathize, that's right, yeah. But I also think for me that would be fine. And I started out very early as the sole data person under someone who has no idea about data. And that was totally cool for me, even as a lead and then later. But doing this step also means you put people who do leadership for 1, 2, 3 years and put them under someone who can't really lead them anymore. Or in other ways, who leads them in a way that they don't like, because there's no real skill development. I mean, there was a lot of leadership development for them, right? That was awesome. But there's a certain dissonance between young data leads or also older data leads and product people, operations people, marketing people that are supposed to lead them. And I mean, it was also funny again, because you could also see that for some there was an issue. Others really thrived in there. So I had one guy who I actually made lead and then immediately put into another team, and that was awesome. He was the most effective person, because he finally could work with the right people, still knew how to get help. But that's, again, you have to be very self-reflected and quite clear about what you need. And I think I can say this. I threw a lot of people in very cold water and still gave them a finger if they wanted help. But in the end, they had to swim themselves somehow. And that, I think, is really the issue when you do this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you're sharing, and I mean, I agree. So you do not have a centralized team for the sake of having centralized team or a federated approach. At the end of the day, this is something that is interrelated, depending on the mindset, the willingness, the capabilities that are there, and you can say, okay, I can share that out. I mean, you saying I gave 80 people from my stuff away, that's an indication, okay, these 80 people have an understanding what they're supposed to do. So you gave them the injection of, these are the principles, this is how you do it, this is your core skill set, competence, and so on that you need, and now go and kind of take over these functional units or areas or whatsoever, and let them become more data-minded, data-literate, and so on.
And enabled and help them.
Exactly.
And I mean, the funny thing is also, for the leads it was hard. I think for many people in the teams, it was way better than before, because it was quite clear what they needed and how to work with the other managers on IC level. So management-wise, always difficult, but IC level, great.
Yeah, I mean, these 80 people at the end of the day, they were these little dots that hold puzzle pieces together. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, and that's actually a picture that I quite heavily use when I introduce these kind of mindsets and say, like, you need to find these people that can be exactly that little tiny part of a puzzle piece that you put then in somewhere and say, like, okay, and now, enable. Yeah.
And that's where the fun part starts, because then you realize who you hired wrong and who you should have fired 1 year earlier or 2 years earlier, because this doesn't work.
Yeah, but as you said, I think also at that time when you were at FreeNow or these stations that you had, there was not an academy where you said, like, okay, they're producing every year X amount of data professions. Yeah. So you had to have these, like outsiders coming from other fields, but who had like a little bit of the right skill set and mindset and drive, to say, I want to work in that field. Yeah. And either they make it or they don't.
Yeah. And I mean, diversity, I think I had a very interesting offer for a chief data officer position while I was at FreeNow. And the first thing where I was like, this might not work was, we need to hire at least 40 people. And I was like, but your company language is German, right? Yeah. I was like, no. I mean, the 120 people at FreeNow, I think German speakers, 20, rising, B-level, whatever, and Germans maybe 10, because you can't find these people, it doesn't work. And that's also something I very early saw at Good Game Studios. If you really want to hire a great team, maybe anti-shout out to what happens in the States right now, doesn't work without diversity and inclusion and being completely open about who works for you.
Yeah, very interesting what you're saying, Now let me ask here a question, also like a follow-up question. When you did all of this, like federalizing the system, and you said also like you would like to be more the person on the side, not necessarily maybe a chief data officer, because at the end that's a title. What it really means, that's a different page.
The strategist, I think.
The strategist, But then, how do you justify your value contribution?
That's always a very difficult question, and I think that doesn't even matter whether you are the CDO, the VP, or whatever. I think you can't. I would say, I mean, I tried for ages to really understand how can you quantify what data teams are doing. And I mean, to be honest, quantifying what data teams are doing is just working the other way around, which we do in marketing quite often, by cutting the data team and seeing what happens without it. And it's very difficult. I think you can always say, you build a plan, you say we want to do this in the next year, it will never work. Because, I mean, if I just look at the last 10-ish years, you have stuff like GDPR, you have stuff like data privacy. You have so many things that completely changed the way you're working. I mean, if we look at how we did marketing in 2017, how we do it nowadays, that's very different. and that's I think that's another thing. I think the important thing is really to, you can also measure stuff like I mean, the best thing is really something like a happiness index. How happy are people in the company with their data, and what data gives them? But then again, that also, I mean, my favorite example is always how people perceive data engineering teams. Data engineering teams are not perceived at all. They are only perceived if the data is not available at the right time. That's the thing.
Exactly. And that's something that we used to say back in the days I mean, I sound so old, but we used to say that about the IT people.
Same.
There was always the saying, the best IT department is the one
that's not seen, not
realized.
Not seen.
Yeah, and now we have the tendency to say this kind of stuff as well about data engineers and so on. But I'm really asking myself, is that mindset the right one?
No, it's not. It's not. But I mean, the problem is most people don't understand what we're doing still, right? I mean, it's still, for me, it's even very hard to make data analysts, data scientists, and data engineers understand how this whole structure works, right? I mean, you go into a company, you realize, best example, they don't have any dashboards. The reason, the solution is not to build dashboards. The solution is to understand what is the use case they have, what are the questions they have. Then you start understanding what the dashboards are. Then you start understanding what kind of data do I need for this. Then you understand whether you need data science models for this in predictive analytics. And then you start building the data warehouse. And I mean, the other way around is quite often people put a data warehouse there, then something is used, but no one understands this. And there's already a great misunderstanding between analysts and data scientists and data engineers. That's the thing. And if that's already there, I mean, obviously the chief product officer will not be able to grasp how difficult it is to build a data infrastructure that gives you the right data at the right time for the right use case.
Would you say, though, that there are some, to kind of shift the conversation more now towards another topic that I wanted to talk with you, KPIs. Would you say, because you said like feel good, and it's hard to track and to indicate or quantify the success of a data team. But would you say there are KPIs that could support, or would you say there are actually no KPIs that could support a data unit to justify their existence or value?
I mean, it's difficult because from my point of view, and many of my former team members would hate me for that, data teams are service teams. It's not like you are building stuff yourself. Yes, you are building great models, but in the end, this is all to provide support for the problems of other teams. And that makes it quite difficult, right? Because you could now say, you have a data science team. Best example, let's take the FreeNow case. Data science team at FreeNow builds search pricing. Every customer hates this, but obviously it's a very important measure to make the companies profitable. And now you could say, hey, by building search pricing, the data team improved the marginal revenue on every tool by 10%. You could say this. But then what does this do to the product team that planned how to get this feature in? What does this do to the tech team that got the feature in? I mean, you can say there are things where data teams work together with other teams and have shared KPIs and shared goals. This would work. But really, I mean, there's like vanity bullshit, like how fast is a ticket solved? What does this say? What does it say that a ticket is solved in 10 minutes? If the ticket is quite difficult, it can be solved in 5 years and has more impact than anything that's solved fast. Or the other thing is, how much are the dashboards used you build? How much time do people spend in Tableau? Yes, that's important, but that's only important for me to understand which people don't look at dashboards enough and which dashboards do I kill. But it doesn't say anything about how great the dashboards are that we build. That's So for me, to really sum this up, data teams can only be evaluated together with the other teams they work with on those things.
But I think that's a very important statement that you make, because that indicates how cross-functional.
It has to be.
It has to be, and it's not a either or, they or them. It's about exactly this, that you collaborate. Ideally, maybe in a federated setup, but if it's not possible to have it in a federated setup, then you have these centralized data scientists and so on going into these use cases and so on, and then this use case org team or whatever squad has delivered then a value, and that is maybe something that needs to be better understood. I mean, we always say that in Germany quite heavily, like we throw concepts over the barrier and say like, okay, here, over the wall, and say like, here, data, business to data to IT, we don't see each other, we don't talk to each other, but here, this is our way of collaboration.
But that's also the funny thing, because I think it also needs to breathe, because in my time at FreeNow, I reported to 2 different CPOs, to a CMO, who's now the CEO, to a CTO. I worked very closely with the COO, so it really always, And I think that's also, maybe it's also showing again that I'm a shit people manager, and I don't like these SMART goals, right? I think I think I did a psychological test at some point, back at Good Game Studios, and there was one sentence in there that said, Tim doesn't give a shit or doesn't like traditional measures. He wants to build his own, and I think that's also the thing, because I also said at FreeNow at some point, we always have these weird goals for your team, and I was like, I think I was reporting to the C-level already, and I was like, I don't want to have measures anymore for myself. I want to be paid my bonus based on the company goals.
Yeah.
And that was, that was received in a, at first, very puzzled way. Okay. Because, it's way easier to get your bonus based on your shitty goals you build yourself. Yeah, on my shitty goals that don't make any sense. And I was like, no. And later I really understood, because at some point I started preaching this whole North Star KPI thing, right? And I think this is really it. You should focus on your KPIs. You should focus on the stuff you do. But to really work well and be effective in the company, you have to understand what the North Stars are.
You need to serve a greater good.
Big pictures, greater good, big picture.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's also, you can also have North Star KPIs and teams, but I think it's really important to understand what is the reason we do this shit, right? Why are we even coming to work? And at FreeNow, that was quite easy quickly, and that's also something I try to apply to every new company I go to. At FreeNow, it was important to increase the number of trips, tours, rides, whatever you want to call this, and to increase the revenue, full stop. Yeah. And that was something I really hammered into the brains of all my team and of everyone in the company, which also resulted at some point in, there was a dashboard every day sent to everyone, so you didn't even have to go into Tableau. It's in your mailbox every morning. That just shows you, these are the results from yesterday's tours, yesterday's trips, these are the goals we have for this month, done. And the fun thing is, a lot of people were like, why do I get this shit? I don't want to see this. Leads and tech, where I was like, dude, you should know this. And you shouldn't just know this to understand how great the business goes, but also because we are in a startup, and maybe it's also good for you to prepare for things to come when these numbers go down. So I think it's just not important for the company, it's also important for yourself and your job to really understand, how is this working? Am I even making an impact? Because sorry to say, if you realize you don't make an impact, I think your superiors realize this far quicker and probably also already have set things in motion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you touched here quite, 7 points here that I would like to highlight. Yeah. First of all, again, KPIs on certain level make sense. Yeah. After a certain hierarchy level or breaking down structure, they don't. Yeah, because then you try to just put it into a frame that is not necessary. Yeah. Secondly, it depends always on the company, the business model, the structure. Startup is different to
there's no one size fits all solution.
One size fits all approach. Yeah, and it really depends. And then it also comes down to then the human nature, that is then also engaged in setting up then certain structures. Because a free spirit like you, let's say that
sounds so esoteric. Probably it's right.
Yeah. I think it's quite right. Yeah, it fits quite well. Yeah. So, delivers. In a different way than maybe others that
100%,
needing that.
100%. Yeah.
Some people need
Some
to
people
have
need structure. I hate structure.
And then, but at the end of the day, and I think that is what people need to understand, because I personally, I think like KPIs, and I don't think that we have here a different understanding. I think KPIs make sense in a certain way, in a certain manner, and also depending on the maturity level that the company has. Yeah. So I cannot assume very ambitious and very detailed KPIs, and maybe not even more than 2 KPIs, if the company is not set up in a way already to function in that manner.
And it's also totally important what the current state of the company is, right? Yes. Are you growing? Are you focusing on retention? Are you focusing on profitability? Most people will tell you all 3 of them. That doesn't make sense. It never does. And it's also very, very great anecdote I always like to tell. Yeah. This dissonance between team OKRs. I was the person to push getting OKRs into FreeNow because they work quite well at Good Game Studios. Yeah. But I also realized OKRs work well if a certain maturity level is there and if certain people think in a certain mindset. Yeah. So they didn't work great at FreeNow. Let's just put it like this. Yeah. And there was this great story that I'm not sure whether you know this, but at some point when a company grows, everyone starts to hire people that really don't fit anymore. Yeah. And my favorite example of persona is someone who thinks very highly of themselves, is very smart. I mean, beautiful jerk again, right? But does things not to improve the company, but to improve the view of themselves. And there was this team, one of these people led, no, not saying names, and they were supposed to improve the conversion rate from the point where you put in your destination in the FreeNow app, and you click on the button with the price, yes, I want to buy this. Okay. So pretty much the thing that shows you this is the price we expect for you to pay. Their KPI was to improve this conversion rate. And they did something really smart that immediately improved this conversion rate 100%, not 100%, I think like 20, 30, 40, because they put an auto-injected voucher in there. So every time you press the button, you on default got €2 off. Okay. If you now think about how much a company like FreeNow makes on a taxi ride, it's not €10. Let's just put it like this. So this means no revenue, no profitability, no CM2. And that was great. And I looked at it, it was completely irritating. I was like, so you do this for everyone. And I mean, this idea is not bad, but you don't do this with a shotgun, because what happens when you do this with a shotgun? The revenue drops. So your KPIs look great. At the end, it looks like shit. And I was like, dude, you have to segment this, because, I mean, 80% of these people would have taken the ride anyways. So you're just burning money. And the answer I got was something that irritated me even more. Was like, no, that's not my KPI. My KPI is to improve this conversion rate.
Oh, wow.
Got him fired afterwards.
Okay.
But this is really something where I'm like, this doesn't fly. Man, I mean, that's the worst thing you can do. And this might have been a bit malicious, but I think that quite often is totally not meant in a bad way. People are just having a tunnel vision, their focus, and they don't think about this. So that's really something where you have to enable them to really see this and to also make this connection. Hey, this is a great idea. I can't build this, I have to segment first. Who wouldn't have taken that ride? Because then, great thing, but yeah.
That's a great example of a KPI that just looks good in that specific...
Again, right, in that frame. If you like zoom in, awesome KPI. If you zoom out, what the fuck is happening? Why are we losing money?
Yeah, but yeah, that's very interesting, I must say. Yeah, Tim. I want to go deep into exactly this kind of scenarios. Yeah, it's great, but for the audience, because they might don't know all the terminologies that you use. So when we say vanity metrics, can you give a crisp explanation?
Something like we just talked about. Vanity metrics is something that looks good on paper and makes people look awesome, but if you look at the whole company and the big picture, it doesn't make any sense. So in the end, it's metrics that, from my point of view, useless. Shiny, but useless.
Okay, good. Because you just gave us an example of that, but would you say that, for example, we always have these kind of reports that deliver us high engagement, conversion spike, click-through, click-through areas and so on. Yeah. So, how would you? Are they important?
I think even vanity metrics are important, but not on their own. So my favorite example is any kind of conversion rate, click-through rate. It's awesome to look at the percentage value. It doesn't make any sense if you don't know that's also different. I wouldn't call conversion rate a KPI. A KPI for me is a number which is measured.
And that has a target.
Exactly, and that has a target. Well, conversion rates also can have targets. Okay, but it's really, for me, it's like a full number, like 20 or 5,000.
Okay,
Conversion rates are metrics built out of KPIs. And I think that's really the important thing. You should never look at a metric without having the KPI in mind, because you can have a conversion rate of 100%, which means that one person comes onto your website and buys something in a month. Yes, great. Which looks much better than a conversion rate of 33%, which could be 10,000 people coming to a website, 3,500 buying something. And that's the thing, right? You should. That's also the thing with North Star KPIs. I think even some KPIs shouldn't be looked at on their own. It doesn't make sense to just look at revenue, because then you don't look at cost, right? The return, the ROAS or the ROI might be complete garbage because the customer acquisition cost is rising. And so it's always a system. I would say you never should look at one thing on their own, and especially not on ratios on their own.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically saying there needs to be context. There needs to be,
that's the most important thing, and that's also what I always try to get out of people. Is really, why do you want to look at this KPI? What answer does this KPI solve? And you don't want to know how often people look at me, were like, should I really tell you why I want revenue? I was like, yes, why do you want revenue? And then they're like, to see how much money we made yesterday.
And then what?
That's not revenue. And then again, also the other thing is like, what kind of revenue do you want? And then they're like, the revenue. Okay, let's go into this room with people that do revenue stuff and ask them what revenue is. And you will get the answer, net, gross, shipping cost, no shipping cost, including marketing costs, not including marketing costs. So it's like revenue, if you have 5 people in the room, you will get at least 3 different answers. And that's also the thing, right? That's people need to understand what they are looking at. And that's really, the first thing that comes is not the KPI. The first thing is really the use case. What do you want to understand? What is the question you want to answer?
Yeah, and speaking the same language.
Yeah, exactly. And that only works with these very, very stupid use cases. Because it might really just be, I want to know revenue because I want to understand how much net revenue we made yesterday, which is just money through the till. And it sounds easy, but there's already like 3 different informations in there. I want to know it on a daily basis. I want to know it on the net level. And for me, revenue is money through the till and not contribution margin 2, for example, which is a KPI that most people won't understand. But I think that's really the important thing.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, you come as an outsider into the company, and you can always claim that, hey, I'm the outsider, I'm allowed to make the stupid questions, and but at the end we realize that there are a lot of people who easily use these terms and say like, I need revenue, I need profit, I need conversion rate.
Completely different things they talk about.
Completely different things that they're talking about, So and they just use it without asking or reflecting for themselves, what do I actually do with that, and why do I need it, and what does it really mean?
And I think you really just understand this if you went to the school of pain you have as a data analyst, because there will always be 2 dashboards having the same KPI with totally different numbers.
Yeah, but that again, like, I mean, I find that, I mean, we always have a little bit these debates. I see always these debates of like, this is now again very theoretical. This is also very academic, because you want to have a definition of this and that, and you're differentiating what is a metric from a KPI, and then a KPI needs to be differentiated from a data product, and also there are different.
That's things I do. That's
exactly. Yeah, but this is the thing is, but exactly, that's what you do.
Exactly.
And why you do it? Because you're a data professional.
Exactly, and it needs to be dumbed down as much as possible for everyone on the outside.
Exactly, but the ones, and I always use this example, really always, I need to come up with a better example, but with the restaurant and the kitchen. Within the kitchen, people need to know how do you prepare that specific meal, and why you use here maybe that black pepper and not the other pepper.
And why 5 grams, not 10 grams, and so on.
Exactly. They need to know, and they need to know these nuances, in preparing and creating and so on and so on. But the guy at the front who's ordering that meal, he doesn't. When he says, I want in my soup a bit more pepper, then give him bloody hell more pepper. Go ahead. But if it's contradicting, to your recipe or whatsoever, then so what?
And I mean, that's the same, right? No one in the management needs to understand how we do multi-touch attribution. What kind of attribution model we use. Always use last click first before you do anything else. That's the most understandable. But that's the important thing, right? It needs to be, that's a very easy word in data for that. You need to aggregate the information. The information needs to be aggregated for different people on different levels. But I still think this only works if they do this maybe slightly academic approach to just reflecting once. What do I even want to know? So, and that's also quite good. I mean, I did this in every company also when I was working there, but I usually try to ask 3 or 4 questions to everyone, which is like, what's the question you want to answer every day? Do you have the data for that? Is there something where you can see this? And most importantly, do you understand what's behind that? Because it's great to just say, this dashboard says this. But I mean, there should be, if this is the KPI, your salary is being paid on, this is your main target, you should also understand where this comes from. And then again, when I say not everyone needs to understand what kind of multi-touch attribution we're doing. The CMO needs to understand this. And not to high detail, but the CMO needs to be able to tell the management that the cost of acquisition decreases a bit because we're focusing more on brand. And with our attribution model, this is, it's something like this.
Yeah, I think it's very important to make sure that, like depending on what kind of stakeholder group you're talking to, you make sure that they have the level of understanding, common understanding.
That enables them.
Yeah, it enables them, and then you need really to ask these questions, these why questions. Why do we need that? Why do we do that? Yeah. So there is a lot of unconscious automatic behavior, and we hear that. I mean, all of us quite often, because we always did that. Yeah. This is historically grown. Yeah, but is historically grown still fitting to the narrative that we need today?
That needs to be disrupted.
This needs to be disrupted. Yeah. So, and now. A scenario, marketing is pushing for better conversion rates. Sales is pushing for more leads. Yeah, leadership wants more growth. Now you come, you sit with these heads in the room, and they do not agree or think like, well, my point is more important. And now you come and you ask them what, and how do you solve that?
I mean, the thing between sales and marketing, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier because, I mean, in the end, look at what you have already. Look at what kind of segments you have in your company. What kind of customer gives you more money? Let's now take the sales and marketing example. Sales is probably more B2B focused. Marketing is more B2C focused. Where do you make your money? And there was also a case at Freenow, right? It was always focused on marketing, but we made loads of money with B2B customers. So you also need to enable sales. And I mean, for me, it's important to really understand what gives the most impact. I mean, in the end, we have to do everything, right? But you only have 2 hands or maybe 10 hands and cannot do everything. And then it's always, I mean, for as mean as it sounds, but for sales, very tiny things and very low-hanging fruits can really enable them. For marketing, it's way more difficult. But I mean, this is the balance you have to find then.
But are there any KPIs where you would say that's actually a KPI that all of you should look into, or that you should work together on?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, that's the thing, right? You want to improve growth. So see which people you get in are really staying. I mean, I think that's also a big misconception about growth, because a lot of people want growth, which then stops at sign up, install. That doesn't make sense. I mean, growth works. I mean, best example, back at Good Game Studios, the best growth we had was from word of mouth or virality or whatever you want to call it today. So what we implemented there, no sales team, but whatever, very quickly was like, you don't look at the cost per acquisition. You look at the cost per 3-day activity. Or these kind of things, right? Really, there's no general answer, but that maybe now might sound a bit arrogant, but I think it's quite easy. If you have these 3 parties in the room, the management wants this. You guys can deliver this. You guys can deliver this. What is the management actually wanting, and how can you go in this direction? And yes, it might be quite different in many companies, but there's tiny things that apply everywhere, and the problems are always very similar. You just have to shape this KPI and shape the understanding in a way that both the marketing and sales understand it, and the management is happy with a number. That's
You said that you said basically that there is KPIs have the issue that there can always happen as some kind of disruption. There always can come some kind of new regulations, new competitors, and so on and so on. Yeah, and then yet on the same time, you advocating this North Star framework. Can you? So where's the truth? Yeah. So because
the truth is somewhere in the middle. There's one framework I really like, which also sounds really bad when you push this as a data person, which is BEATS by Ben Dutta, great guy from the States. I was also on a podcast with him. And BEATS really mean you have 5 different levels of data and information you should look at. The first one is business. To be honest, if you go into a company and the revenue and the revenue versus cost ratio rises every day, don't give a shit about anything else. Your product is viral, you don't need a product team, you don't need a marketing team. Product team maybe to build stuff, but marketing and data, just throw money out of it, money comes back 10 times. Done. If that doesn't work anymore, it's experimentation. It's still not really looking into the data. It's more like, oh, it doesn't work that great anymore. Maybe I should put a little bit more money into Google for a month and look at this. Or maybe I should switch off this product feature because that might not be perfect. That's the next one. Still no data. And I mean, these are the most important things, right? This is really just understand the high level of your business. How does this work? Then it's analytics. Then you can really go into this, into the revenue data and see, oh, we did this, what happened? Then it's tracking, because that also sounds bad, but most companies work quite well without tracking, because you have a number from here, a number from here. There doesn't need to be a connection between those. And to be honest, it's also something people have to understand, this connection between maybe your marketing cost data and your conversion data. Since 2018, this becomes less and less and less and less and less. And the final thing is the unloved stepchild, which is surveys. Ask your customers what actually they want and why do they use your product. Which, again, same as conversion rates, is something, never use the results from surveys on their own, right? I mean, build maybe very small, stupid hypothesis, but something like this.
Yeah. Sounds very easy. Why is it so difficult?
Because people often start at the wrong point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, mostly when I come into companies, I mean, my favorite example is a food delivery thing from Hamburg I worked with recently, and they had a really good data team. I mean, they did the error to hire 3 data scientists for the data team, but these data scientists were quite good. So they wanted to build data engineering, they wanted to build analytics. They were happy with that. But the problem was, I came into this company, and they didn't have dashboards. They had 5 reports no one used.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And they had a perfect data warehouse. Very small company, but I've rarely seen something so well built. I learned a lot about new tools with that. It was quite good for me as well. I was like, but you have this. And the data team was like, yeah, but we don't know what they want. And I asked the others, yeah, but we don't know what we can get. I was like, oh, maybe that's the issue. Maybe you should say what you need. And it's all there. I mean, it was really, that was the easiest job I ever had, because it was like, oh, you need dashboards for this, 2 days done.
Yeah, okay, great.
Because it was all there. And then, yeah, sure, we had to build more marketing stuff that took a little bit longer, but it was also already there, because quite often they start at the technical side. And I think that's not the right side. And that's why this beats thing sounds very stupid, but it's really something you should go to step by step. Do you still understand everything on this level? No. Then we have to go one level down.
Yeah. And that's why people like you, who say, I'm in between, are so important, because you do these translation activities.
And I also think it's even better if you are in between, but still an outsider. Because this in-between function, and this, I'm not sure, I had this very nice podcast yesterday with Sundar, who did this 35 million money improvement during incrementality test at Uber, because he found something. But that's all the thing, right? You might find something which then says, oh, we have to cut this marketing channel. It doesn't give any more, it doesn't give benefit, but then you also have to find someone on top who has the balls to do this. And I think this is a lot harder when you are inside the company, because as bad as it sounds, people trust you less, because you might have been there for quite some time, you might have a tunnel vision, you might have be quite focused on your targets, but it's way easier to really disrupt this and have the trust when people think, I'm paying this guy a lot of money for that, so he must be right.
It's for me, it's this. Yeah, I mean, for me, human nature is such an interesting thing. Yeah, because you and I include myself. We have these. We understood that if we are internals, we are seen as the rebellions. We are seen as the disruptor and troublemaker, and whatever we want to call it. Yeah, some of them sound more nice, some of them less. Yeah, but we said, okay, we need to get out of this environment, because we cause more harm probably that we should. Yeah. Then we are brought back to these companies. Yeah, I worked for companies that I was an internal, and I hit the wall with my approach. But then I came back as an external, And then I was, I don't know, still the same face.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, I'm very good friends with a lot of people at Free now, and we still talk about these things. Maybe I should take money for this. I don't do that there. But it's like, it's also a very different way of talking to each other because, I mean, I think the thing is also when you are internal, you also make more mistakes that are, well, that also sounds bad, that are obvious. Not because you don't, the mistakes you do as an external aren't seen, but you do things because you are in the, I think the hamster wheel is also really a thing that you have to focus on way too many other things and you can't focus on the important stuff.
I think also it has a lot to do with the other side, which is the receiver of the message.
The perception.
Yeah, because I think it's more about if you are an internal, it's a bit more like, okay, I do not have to now be that, how do you say it? It's a little bit like, I do not have to try to be the best version of myself in my manners, in how I communicate and how I reflect and so on, So I'm easier being a little bit like reactive or showing nasty behavior, I mean, it's comparable also.
It's funny because I work together with the CEO at Free now in 3 companies. And he was also one of the first people at Good Game Studios who worked very closely with me because I was disrupting stuff. And he said this very interesting sentence after I went out and after I started freelancing. He was like, yeah, this is what you do right? I mean, the problem at Free now with you at the end was you were, I'm not sure what the word is. I resignated at some point because if you're really in a company and you try to do good things for 5 years, and some people see this, but it's very hard to get this. I mean, the issue is very rarely with management, right? The issue is rarely with management. The issue is rarely with ICs. The issue is in the fucking middle management because people are like this all the time. And he said, you are back to your old self. You are back to coming into a room, telling people this is bullshit, telling them this is how you should do it. I mean, that's important, right? Never tell people what you do is wrong without having a solution or at least an idea how to fix this. And I also realized this so quickly after getting out. I was like, yeah, this is what I do. This is what I do well. Not holding back, but really being. And I mean, you are stuck in politics at some point, right? And I mean, this maybe this resignation level where you're like, I really want to kick this person and tell them what they're doing is bullshit. But they're quite good friends with this guy, and this might be bad. And I don't want to think about this.
Exactly.
This is what completely blocks me.
I call it the Game of Thrones. Of corporate world.
More red weddings. More red weddings in these things. It's
Yes.